That's who built this place. That's who stole your lives. That's who's coming back.
Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy. So, Loki Season 2 breaks the rules that the MCU has established. Loki is time-slipping, something that, according to everybody's new favorite person in the multiverse, OB, says it's impossible to do in the TVA. Yet, Loki is time-slipping all over the place. So, something huge is happening here. Because time-slipping is now a thing, and it might be the very thing that explains how Kang returns and becomes He Who Remains. That's right, we think that Season 2 will show us the return of He Who Remains. After all, he did promise that he would be reborn. And we're certain that Kang the Conqueror from Quantumania is coming back, and he's actually going to become He Who Remains. Now it's kind of wild, but we got a theory on how it all makes sense and connects.
We got to the man at the end of time, and he made sense.
Thanks to Brilliant.org for sponsoring this video. But first, I want to thank all of you for watching this video and supporting our channel. It's taken us years since Loki Season 1 to get this channel built up this far, and you have been a big part of that. And if you want to continue to support our channel, we have our very own merch store at ScreenCrushMerch.com, where me and the ScreenCrush team design the shirts ourselves. And we are so excited to show you our new Loki shirts. We have Doug as Loki, all the variant suspects with your favorite time travelers from TV and film, the variant hoodie with a variant ScreenCrush logo, and the Dolly Miss Minutes where she's melting away like the rest of the TVA. Again, thanks all of you for making this channel a success. It is not my channel, it is our channel, and thanks again. Alright, so at the end of Season 1, Loki sees Kang's statue in the TVA. Now we know that Loki was actually sent to the past to a time when Kang, or He Who Remains, ruled the TVA openly. That was before he installed the Timekeepers in his place. And we have a theory on why he did that, by the way, that we will explain a little later in the video. So, Loki is time-slipping through time, and this effect is very similar to the glitching that we see in the Spider-Verse movies. And we're sure that canon events are part of it, but more on that later. More importantly, Loki is rewriting the future by changing the past, and that is another thing that shouldn't be possible in the MCU.
A long time ago, he came to me complaining about time slipping. How did I not remember that?
Wait, is he talking to you in the past and you're just now remembering it?
Wow, that makes perfect sense.
The time slipping is how He Who Remains will return. Remember, he promised that once the sacred timeline was unraveled and Sylvie kills him, he will be reborn.
You plunge your blade in my chest, and an infinite amount of me start another multiversal war, and I just end up right back here anyways.
And this is because time is a loop. Everything that He Who Remains did in the past will repeat itself because of the nature of the multiverse. It is a cycle, and Loki Season 2 marks the start of the renewal of this loop. Both Loki and OB represent this loop perfectly. OB's full name is Ouroboros. It's an ancient symbol of a snake eating its own tail.
Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes?
It represents the circle of life. Now, time is a loop, death and rebirth, just like the sacred timeline, a circle that is endlessly looping on itself. And Mobius is named after a Mobius strip, which is itself a loop. And also, it's how Tony Stark invented time travel. Okay, so get this. In this episode, OB said that time slipping was like getting sucked into a black hole. And in the Season 1 finale, we saw that black holes are actually gateways to other timelines.
Okay, I'm picking up what you're putting down. What's all that mean?
Well, that means that in theory, every time a star goes supernova, there is a chance that a black hole will be created and a gateway to another universe will open up.
Wow, how do you know so much about supernovas and black holes?
Well, because I spend about 15 minutes a day doing math and science lessons to sharpen my brain with Brilliant, the sponsor of this video. Brilliant is great for understanding big things like supernovas or just regular household items, like how toilets work.
Man, don't even get me started. Humans are way too complicated with how they do things.
Brilliant is a great way to challenge myself to learn something new every day, like science, computer science, or math. See, I was like the worst math and science student in school, and maybe you were too. And I felt like as an adult, I would never have a chance to learn those subjects. They seem so out of reach. But Brilliant is perfect for understanding the world around us. Like, learning math is challenging, but if I can learn math, I can learn anything, and learning is a lifelong skill. You see, with Brilliant, you learn how to think. Brilliant uses these visual lessons that make them a fun part of my morning routine. I mean, guys, to learn anything, you have to just do it. Interactive learning is proven to be 6 times more effective than passive learning, like just watching videos online. These are fun, short lessons that are built for busy people. I especially love logic problems and nonlinear thinking puzzles, and these are built more like games than classroom lessons. I mean, with Brilliant, you learn how to think better. So, to try everything Brilliant has to offer for free, free for a full 30 days, and to get a 20% discount on an annual plan, visit brilliant.org/ScreenCrush or click the link in the description. Now back to Loki. See, Loki also represents loops. Loki's name is derived from the word luk. It's the Norwegian word for loop. Loops and rebirth are the focal point of Norse mythology, and Loki is the catalyst of change within that mythology. Now this is something that we explored in one of our favorite Loki videos we ever did, exploring Loki's amazing arc in the MCU. Anyways, Loki is responsible for everything that happens in the myths. He is the reason for Ragnarok. It is a cataclysmic war that serves as the end and rebirth of the world. Now, Ragnarok parallels the multiversal war. Reality will collapse, but then He Who Remains will erase all of his variants and create the sacred timeline, which represents the renewal of the multiverse. And some eons later, the whole process starts all over again. And just like in myth, Loki is the catalyst of change that will propel the multiverse into its renewal. So remember, Sylvie used He Who Remains' temp pad to send Loki back to the TVA. But we think it was He Who Remains' plan for Loki to end up in the past. He somehow made Loki time slip in the TVA, something that should not be possible.
It's impossible to time slip in the TVA.
I know, but we just saw it happen.
Yeah, I'm having trouble reconciling that.
With time slipping, Loki is influencing the present by changing the past, like giving OB his nickname.
May I call you OB?
OB? I like that.
And this is another thing that should be impossible, as the rules of time travel clearly state that
if you travel to the past, that past becomes your future, and your former present becomes the past, which can't now be changed by your new future.
Incorrect.
So everything that has happened to Loki is part of He Who Remains' plan. Just look at the chain of events that happen after Loki returns to the TVA. He starts time slipping between the past and the present. So Mobius brings Loki to OB, since OB is the only person in the TVA who can know what is happening to Loki. Some fun banter here, and OB realizes that the TVA is having power outages, and that takes them to the temporal loom, which is being overloaded because of all the new branching timelines. The loom is like this temporal grinder. Branching timelines go in, get pruned, and the sacred timeline stays, well, sacred. And then all of these timelines are sent to the void at the end of time, where they become the lunch of Goliath. That's He Who Remains' guard dog that eats pruned variants and timelines. But now, without He Who Remains, the timelines are branching faster than the loom can weave them. So the loom is melting like a really bad nuclear power plant, and the only way to stop this baby from going Chernobyl is to prune all those branching timelines. Now, since Loki and his friends don't want multiversal genocide on their hands, OB closes the blast doors to protect the TVA from all that temporal energy, because that stuff will peel the skin right off your face.
You'll get very old and all your skin will get peeled away and you will die.
But that's only a temporary solution. When Loki slips into the future, he sees that the loom overloads again and the TVA is about to blow. Now, in between all that madness, Loki gets pruned and pulled back to the present.
Yeah, so what was all that about? Who pruned Loki?
Well, we did talk about that in our Indian Explained video, but we're going to revisit that in just a moment. OB says that he will need to retrofit the loom to handle all of these branching timelines. Now, OB knows a lot about the inner workings of the TVA. He's the guy who wrote the TVA guidebook. Well, at least he knows everything that He Who Remains allowed him to know. I'm pretty sure he won't be able to modify the loom without some help. Now, Miss Minutes ran the thing by herself, but she's disappeared, and we think that she's with Ravonna Renslayer on a mission to bring back He Who Remains. And here's how it all connects, and how Kang and Victor Timely are going to fit into all of this.
Victor, do you say what now?
Well, Victor Timely is the other Kang variant that we saw in the credit scene of Quantumania.
Time. It shapes our lives, but perhaps we can shape it.
So what we think is going to happen is OB will need Kang to fix this loom. And this is why Loki and Mobius will need to bring Victor Timely to the TVA. And get this, in one of the trailers there is a brief moment where we see Victor in OB's basement. So it confirms that Loki and Mobius will bring him to the TVA so he can fix the loom. The trailers also show Victor Timely making a demonstration of some sort of machine, which looks like a steampunky version of a time machine.
What you're about to witness is not magic. It is purely science.
And check out the design of his machine. It looks like a miniature version of the temporal loom. We even see the blueprints of this machine in the closing credits, and those provide clues to other things in this season. Victor building a machine that looks exactly like the loom cannot be a coincidence. This means only one thing. Victor Timely is the one who designed the loom. Or I guess he will be the one who designed it, relatively speaking. And this is why we believe that Victor Timely is an earlier version of He Who Remains.
What? Who are you? You're me? I've come from the Doctor's timeline to make sure you take that job. It's essential to our future.
And everything that happened in the first episode, Loki time slipping, meeting OB, the Loom, all of that is part of some grand plan to bring Victor Timely to the TVA so he could start his predestined path on this endless loop. This is the beginning of He Who Remains' return.
But wait, person? How can Victor What's-His-Name build the loom thingy if it already exists? I'm so confused because I am so small.
Well, okay, so that's the Ouroboros. It's a paradox. It is an endless time loop.
And don't worry about the days.
Cause and effect, one action leads to the other like a domino effect.
Would you still have broken it if I hadn't said anything?
And this raises the question from season 1. Is free will possible in the sacred timeline? Does anyone actually make choices, or is it all an illusion, all part of the path that He Who Remains has paved forward? If time is a loop, then it means that there is no real choice, that everyone is following a written script without even realizing it. And this brings us to how He Who Remains will return and how Victor Timely and Kang the Conqueror are actually all the same person.
Wait, what, Kang? You mean the guy that got beat by ants in Ant-Man 3?
Yes, we think he's going to return and that he will become He Who Remains.
But he's dead. He got eaten by ants.
He was not eaten by ants. He was sucked into an engine core which is connected to time travel and the multiverse.
Just a flesh wound.
Now, the core blew up, but not before transporting Kang out of the quantum realm. You see, the core is like a vortex, and it might work as a time portal of sorts. That makes sense because the quantum realm was used for time travel, and by extension, used for multiversal travel. And this could explain how Kang survived. And before you guys comment about it, we understand how the multiverse works. There are countless versions of Kang in the multiverse, so even if this variant dies, there are still many other Kangs. But Marvel already introduced this guy as Kang the Conqueror.
I am Kang!
The Kang in Avengers Kang Dynasty. So just killing him off and then doing another version of him just makes Quantumania and this Kang a total waste of time. And sure, this Kang might have been defeated by Ant-Man and the Wasp and a bunch of ants, but he's also a really interesting villain. I really liked his motivations, and he seems to be somebody with a lot of layers to him.
Time, it's not what you think it is. It's a cage, and it does everything it can to break you.
And there are many similarities between this Kang and He Who Remains, especially their motivations. We see that Kang wants to create something that looks like the sacred timeline. And both of them wage a war against the other Kangs, meaning the Council. They both believe that the only way to save the multiverse is to erase all of their variants. And in fact, we made a video explaining all the similarities between these two guys and how they're actually the same person.
I've been dubbed many names by many people. A ruler, a conqueror, He Who Remains.
But this isn't just wishful thinking. The engine is the power source for a multiversal traveling machine, but it's also connected to the multiverse and time travel itself. You see, when Scott enters the engine core, he starts splitting into countless versions of himself. It's a probability storm that represents how the multiverse works. Essentially, every possible decision that Scott could make manifests as a different Scott. Just as every possible decision we make every day could lead us to creating a new separate timeline. So what happens when someone, in this case Kang, keeps shrinking inside the core?
You would enter a reality where all concepts of time and space become irrelevant as you shrink for all eternity.
The core would be a quantum computer that works like the improbability drive.
It passes through every conceivable point in every conceivable universe almost simultaneously. In other words, you're never sure where you'll end up or even what species you'll be when you get there.
Meaning that it can send Kang to any universe and any time because of the infinite probability storm. So to simplify it, Kang does not die. He shrinks out of the space-time continuum and is sent to another time. And that is how he lands in the early 20th century, where he becomes Victor Timely. Or perhaps Kang needed someone to pull him out of the probability storm while he was stuck in a superposition state. Just like Loki needed Mobius to pull him out after he was pruned.
And then if it doesn't do that?
Well, have you heard about how if you fall into a black hole, you turn into spaghetti?
No.
Good. The less you know about that, the better.
So who pulled Kang?
That would be Ravonna Renslayer. She was sent on a mission by Miss Minutes, and we know that Miss Minutes is an agent of He Who Remains. And that mission is to ensure that Kang becomes He Who Remains. So Ravonna saved Kang, and that somehow sent him back in time to the early 20th century. That is, he's stranded in the past. He's lost all of his time-traveling toys. But Kang is not just a multiversal conqueror. He's also a scientist, like Batman.
There's a man here who thinks he can help you.
Batman?
No, he's a scientist.
Batman's a scientist.
It's not Batman.
So all of this is part of He Who Remains' path on the timeline. In the past, Victor built the machine that would later be used as the Loom in the TVA. And he might even create an AI that will become Miss Minutes. Then Loki and Mobius will arrive, and that puts Kang/Victor on the trajectory of transforming into He Who Remains.
Now wait, person, wouldn't it make more sense for Victor to be the first and then become Kang?
You know, you might think so, but it actually makes more sense for Kang to be the first version. You see, in the comics, a version of Kang becomes Victor Timely. After a humiliating defeat by the Avengers, Kang retreats to the 20th century, becoming Victor Timely and establishing his own town in Wisconsin. This is similar to Kang's humiliating defeat by the Ant Squad. Now, Victor is the one who built the city of Chronopolis. It's Kang's base of operations, a city that exists outside of time and space, and this is very similar to the TVA. Chronopolis became a constant in time, always existing on the timeline. The Prime Kang, that's the original version of Kang, eventually took over the city. So this is why it makes sense for the Kang in Quantumania to be the first version. He then becomes Victor Timely, who builds the TVA, and then he becomes He Who Remains. So we're actually seeing He Who Remains' story out of chronological order.
Wow, that makes perfect sense. There's no flaw in that logic.
Before the loop was even created, the TVA was built by Victor/Kang. But now it's always there, inseparable from the loop. And this is how the TVA already exists, despite the fact that Victor is the one who invents the loom and the TVA itself. And this created the paradox, because how could Kang/Victor create the TVA if it already exists? He Who Remains might have paved the road for everything on the sacred timeline, but he also must follow a predetermined path so that he could be reborn to create the sacred timeline. So even for He Who Remains, time is a cage, and this is exactly how Kang described time.
It's a cage, and it does everything it can to break you.
We see this when he talks to Loki and Sylvie. From everything he says, he didn't just see everything that happened and will happen, he's also a prisoner of predetermination. And that is why he cannot stop the sacred timeline from branching and why he cannot prevent the Kang War. He's like Dr. Manhattan. On one hand, he is a god, but on the other hand, he is a prisoner of the sum of his choices.
I have no choice. Everything is preordained, even my responses.
Just like anyone else, he must play out his role on the multiversal timeline. And then we see this loop represented at the end of the episode when Loki slips into the future. He sees that the loom is overloading again, which is the reason why when he gets back to the present, they will need to fix the loom. Loki also sees Sylvie, and then he gets pruned just in time for Mobius to save him in the past, or the present, relative to the timeline.
Okay, so who pruned Loki? Was it Sylvie?
I don't think so. So Loki gets pruned from behind, and we actually see the time stick through the hole in his body. So it couldn't have been Sylvie.
So who could it be?
Well, here's our prediction. We talked about this in our Ending Explained video, but here it is again.
Drum roll, please. Can anybody guess?
It was Loki.
What?
Not another variant, but a future version of Loki. So OB theorized that Loki being pruned would fix his time slipping. However, from the trailers, we see that the time slipping won't stop yet. And in the trailers, we see that Loki will meet another version of himself at some point. This means that Loki is now on a predetermined path. He must play out the chain of events that leads him to pruning himself, just like he was pruned by the future Loki, meaning that he will become the future Loki.
Of course. Yeah.
You know what? It's a lot like Terminator, where John Connor sends Kyle Reese back in time to save his mom Sarah and make a baby who grows up to be John, who sends Kyle Reese back in time to save his mom Sarah and make a baby who grows up to be John, who sends Kyle Reese back in time to make a baby with John. Hey, welcome back, ScreenCrush.
Person?
Yeah.
You're terminating again.
Sorry, I'm looping. So Loki has to fulfill his fated destiny so he can exist, and the loop just keeps repeating itself. So because of time travel, there is no beginning nor end anymore. It is an Ouroboros. And this is the same paradox with He Who Remains. And Ravonna Renslayer is on a mission to ensure that all of this happens according to the plan.
What do you mean by that?
Well, if Loki and Mobius bring Victor to the TVA and he's the man who will become He Who Remains, then they might try to influence him, change him, even use the time slipping to rewrite the future. So Ravonna is there to make sure that Victor becomes He Who Remains. Now from the trailer, we see that she will be in the same time era as Victor Timely. She will probably meet Victor while he's still in the past and influence him before Loki and Mobius can recruit him. And there is a connection between He Who Remains and Ravonna.
Ravonna Renslayer, you are quite a marvel. I will be proud to lead with you.
In the comics, she and Kang are actually lovers. Well, sort of, depending on your perspective of love. In the show, though, Ravona's mission is to guide Victor on his path to becoming He Who Remains. You see, she worships the Timekeepers, so when she meets Victor, she's going to revert him back to his Kang the Conqueror persona. This is why he built statues for himself, so his loyal subjects would worship him as their savior. But over the eons, Kang will lose his appetite for playing God. We even see that He Who Remains is a man filled with regret over the horrors of his actions. He knows that what he's doing is morally wrong, but it's the only way he can save the multiverse.
I've lived 1,000,000 lifetimes. I've gone through every scenario. This is the only way. The TVA, it works.
So this will be the reason why he retreats to the castle at the end of time and instills the Timekeepers as the proxy rulers of the TVA. But remember, Loki and Sylvie might be the key for breaking this loop, because with time slipping, Loki can rewrite the future. This is because he and Sylvie are anomalies, a glitch in the Matrix, like Neo. So they might be the key in Avengers Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars. They could be the ones who break this loop and help the heroes save the multiverse. But that's a topic for another video. So this is how we think He Who Remains will return. Do you think Kang from Quantumania will be back and become Victor Timely? Let me know your thoughts and theories down in the comments below, and special shout out to the writer and editor of this video, Pavel T. And guys, if it's your first time at the channel, please subscribe, smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.